This episode is brought to you by VPP Simplified. Now you can get element by element tracking and guidance for your VPP journey. Every aspect of the VPP requirements in one easy-to-use interactive spreadsheet. It explains every sub-element in detail, contains an easy-to-read stoplight so you can track current status for each sub-element. It provides you with a 3-step verification for completion of each sub-element. There's even a notes section for you to compile language that will eventually be used for your VPP application. It even comes complete with graphs to show current state and track your progress moving forward. Look, achieving VPP star status can be tough, but understanding what it takes to get there can be simplified. This VPP Gap tool will help you do that. Go to vppsimplified.com for more information.
Welcome to the Safety Pro Podcast, where we help you manage workplace safety one episode at a time. And now, your very own Safety Pro, Blaine J. Hoffman.
Welcome to another episode of the Safety Pro Podcast. This episode, I want to talk about changing workplace culture. I have had several episodes about safety culture in the past. All that information is still relevant. For this discussion, let's define culture and focus mostly on a framework that we need to use to facilitate the change that we need. So identifying that we need to improve aspects of our workplace culture and kind of labeling the kind of culture we have using the culture continuum or some gap assessments, perception surveys. That's all good and well, but what do you do when you identify the gaps? That's what I want to focus on. So culture can be, for this discussion, culture is the character and personality of your organization. It's what makes your organization unique and is the sum of its values, traditions, beliefs, interactions, behaviors, and attitudes. So this is key. The values, traditions, beliefs, interactions, behaviors, and attitudes. These are what drive, everything we see outwardly. It also helps workers make choices that we see in actions and behaviors. These are all sort of the internal filters employees will use to decide how they're going to act or behave, in what manner, what motivates them. The reason I bring this up, I bring up this whole you need a framework. You need a tool to affect change culturally in the workplace. Not just with safety, but, any kind of change. Is that, for the last year or so, I have been talking to colleagues, reading and chatting in online groups. And I even see these sort of thought leaders, gurus out there in organizational development or safety culture development talking about this. And as many of you know, I had been in consulting for, over a decade, specializing in, organizational culture development. So you can guess that I have an opinion about this. I'm going to use a specific example of what I had seen recently, and it was a theme, and they run in these circles, right? These gurus and thought leaders, which they're all great. Don't get me wrong, but you'll see a theme emerge, where when one writes something about a topic, you'll see 3 or 4 versions of that article get written and rewritten by the other ones. And one common article I had been reading about and seeing pop up on LinkedIn was about not talking about regulations or starting a conversation with, according to OSHA, or OSHA says. It talked about that's a bad sign. And what I mean by that is, we can all agree that not having to drag in references to regulations is good if we can avoid it. We often have to go to those minimum standards, though. That's the problem. And what's the reason that these authors give? It's because that's a sign of a bad safety culture. Anytime you start a conversation with, according to OSHA, or OSHA says, then, you're the problem. Well, maybe. Maybe our messaging can be better. I will be the first one to admit that as safety professionals, we often step in it when we continuously use technical jargon or safety ease, right? Safety speak. We should just use, normal language when talking with supervisors, workers. It should be a normal conversational tone. We shouldn't have to use a lot of jargon and technical terms and acronyms. Certainly not to make ourselves sound smart. Sometimes we can't avoid it, but it's the way we approach it that matters, right? Well, in reading these articles, they're saying, hey, stop saying that. Stop doing that. Like that, just doing that alone is going to magically change your safety culture. Now, workplace culture often drives how we communicate about safety. And the mistake that most folks make is they manage by aspirational cultural values or from a future state they have in mind. And here's what I mean. A lot of professionals will pick up a book about culture this and culture that, or they read the Toyota way, and then they look at their work culture and say, hey, we need to be just like that. Here's the problem. You're not Toyota. And if you're listening and you're Toyota, I apologize. You actually are Toyota, but I think you get my point. It's like small businesses or companies that compare themselves to Google and Apple. You're not Google or Apple. When you read these books, what you have to keep in mind is some context, and many of them do kind of lay out sort of the path they took, but most of them are aspirational books about how they succeeded and where they're at now, and you too can make change, and you too can do this. What you don't get is, it could take years, decades even, for large organizations like that to really get to where they need to be and then struggle every day to continue to improve, not just sustain that, but improve it going forward. And what you often miss are all the tools and framework they had to use to manage and facilitate that massive cultural change, that transformational change that was needed. One example in manufacturing is the introduction of additive manufacturing technology and 3D printing of metals and all this new way of manufacturing. It requires a whole different way of approaching how we plan for work, how we set up jobs, how we can even just come up with rapid prototyping and the way we used to do things versus now. It introduces a whole new set of risks and materials. It is a fundamental transformation of an industry. I believe it. I believe that additive technology and 3D printing in manufacturing is going to be revolutionary. The problem is, we need to get ahead of it. We need to sort of have a framework to manage the change needed to adopt this technology, to have our businesses pivot and embrace this new world, a new way of doing things that we didn't do in the past. So for me, for workplace safety culture, that's what I'm kind of getting at. We know where we want to be and we know where we want to go. And then people just manage from that point, when what they should be doing is they should be managing from where they're at, right? You need a roadmap to get there. And the roadmap starts with your current position. Where are you at right now? Okay, don't approach your work culture as if you're already there, and then you start saying, well, a successful, high-functioning workplace safety culture does this, that, and the other, so we're going to make everybody do this, that, and the other in the meetings and the activities and the groups, and that means we're going to be a high-functioning workplace safety culture. No, you're not. You have to say, well, what are some of the things needed to be done to, the training, the people, the personnel, the tools, the technology, the software even. What do we need to change about our business and how we operate from day to day that will allow us to start to implement some of those things? Again, aspirations are commendable. It sets sort of a goal, a pin in a map, but we need to develop that path to get there. So you manage from where you are, not where you think you should be. Before I get any further into, what I'm talking about, specifically this, let's get away from having to talk about what the regs say or the minimum requirements are. Let's take a break and talk about the official floor marking and floor sign company of the Safety Pro podcast, and that is, of course, Mighty Line Floor Tape. They know how important safety is to your organization. And the breadth of the Mighty Line product line covers everything you need to implement a 5S system for increased productivity at your facility and the safety of your workers. I mean, just as an example, their 5S floor markings, it's a great way to stay organized. They have the angles, the dots, the arrows, even the little footprints you put down on the floor to indicate pedestrian traffic. Those are just a few of the 5S markings that they offer. Add that to the fact that Mighty Line floor tape has a patented technology that makes them more durable than other floor tapes. For example, their floor tape, 7 times thicker than the average floor tape. And the beveled edge increases durability for forklift traffic. It even removes easily with their peel and stick adhesive. And it's all made right here in the USA. And as an exclusive Safety Pro podcast offer, you can get a free sample by going to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Fill out the form, get a free sample. You can even catch past episodes of the Safety Pro podcast right on that webpage. They're great partners in safety. They can help you in your facilities. Go to mightylinetape.com/podcast. Get a free sample of Mighty Line floor tape today. Getting right back into it. Again, if you think you should not have to talk about minimum regulations because you feel your culture is, should be so far past that, but yet you continuously get challenged by leaders, supervisors, workers. They say, well, show me where it is I have to do that. Or where does it say I have to do that? Then I'm sorry. Wishing isn't enough. You're not there yet. You still have to manage that and at the same time have this framework for affecting that change. So you can try and avoid stating regulations or reciting that unfortunate phrase, well, according to OSHA, but at some point you're going to have to, simply because your culture is still there. And that's okay. Recognizing that there's a need to change is the first step, right? It's like talking about a 12-step program here, but it is the first step. I've heard this time and time again, and I've had key personnel in facilities, leadership, flat out ask, hey, what's the policy or regulation on this or that? Well, what are we supposed to do here or there? Most of the time, they're seeking validation. Just give it to them. These are folks that just need to be consulted. Give them the info because this is what they're saying they need as a basis for their work or validating that they're on the right track. You may eventually get past this point through education, training, things like that, but this is where you are right now. Manage from there. You have to determine what is motivating folks to ask that question. Hey, show me where I have to do this, or show me what the reg says about that, or tell me what I have to do in this case. Sometimes they're just asking for validation. They're just looking for consult, from you. It's different. It's a whole nother sign if they're asking what's the minimum amount I need to do to get by. Or when you attempt to go above and beyond and improve on a minimum standard, because it does make sense. There are many best practices out there that far exceed minimum safety requirements. But if you get pushback on, and you hear statements like, well, we never had to do this before, or, well, it always worked before, what's the problem? Then we have missed an opportunity when we just say, well, we want to be above and beyond. We're supposed to go above and beyond. So we're just going to go ahead and change some of our policies and procedures, make them above and beyond, and then you get pushback from your culture because they're just not ready yet. They weren't aware that we needed to change anything. They don't have the desire to do it, so they're going to resist change, and that's normal. These are all clear signs of you needing to understand where your work culture is right now, not wishing where you would like them to be and running headlong into that. Again, those aspirations should motivate us to discover where we are, our current state, through some of the tools that I provided in previous podcasts. A culture map, a gap assessment, a perception survey. Those are all tools we can use to discover current state. That is where you need to be working from. Find out your current state, and then you can determine the difference between that and the ideal or future state. That gap, that's what we need to work to close. That way we can devise a change plan that is realistic and addresses the areas that need developed and not focus on things we will never be able to improve. If you're tired of having to say, according to OSHA, then ask, why are you still having to say it? If you try to improve something beyond minimum compliance and get pushback, ask, what is it folks are resisting exactly? It may just be the change, resistance to change. And it's not even specific to safety. So you may want to shift the focus to change management in general. Go ask the quality folks or the lean folks if they have issues or struggle with implementing even small changes to tasks or tooling in the work environment. Chances are they do, because resistance to change is human. It's a human thing. It's a normal, I don't want to say normal in a good way, but it is common. It's common, and it's not unique to safety. So let's pull back and let's look, sort of with a wide angle lens at change in general. Don't get wrapped around the axle that your safety culture is broken when it may just be a people thing. Strive to work with the other teams in your organization to find these common obstacles or barriers. Safety professionals, we need to stop operating in a vacuum and collaborate with other areas of the business, other teams, and strategically align our efforts to improve workplace culture in general. And it's okay to pick up these books I mentioned earlier. I recommend several on my resources page. If you go to the website and click on resources, I have a whole reading list. What we also need to add to that is this framework that's needed. Okay. Again, don't get so wrapped up in your silo, your safety column, and think this is unique to your department. Most likely it's not. And if you've had something figured out, like a specific aspect of the culture that you can improve, that safety would benefit, then you need to reach out and you need to share this with others in the organization, because chances are they are going to reap benefits from that change as well. We need to collaborate and partner with others in the organization. So I'm going to encourage you to look into some management of change approaches, helping workers deal with change. That is where we need to align ourselves. If we're trying to improve specific aspects of workplace safety, and we've identified aspects of a workplace culture, what management of change do we have? So so let's say you have a change plan. You've laid out timelines for training on whatever initiative you want to implement, whether it's, partnering with OSHA and the VPP, just improving workplace safety culture. So you've identified some gaps and some things you're falling short on, right? You've even got laid out how long before everyone gets new tools or equipment, new software to track data, things like that. A project management type of process. But do you have a process for cultural change, people change? Now, one example of a framework you can use is ADKAR, ADKAR, the ADKAR model. Again, this is just one example. There are many out there. Okay, so you've got to find one that kind of fits your organization and the culture that you have and the people and the resources that you have available to you. But ADKAR is a very popular model. I've used it successfully in the past, and I still use aspects of this. It's a framework you can use, and you can call upon it in different areas of business, but I'll explain it. There's a book. It's on my recommended reading list. I'll have a link in the show notes for it, so don't worry about any of that. I'm going to kind of break down the acronym. ADKAR is an acronym, as you've probably been able to figure out up to this point. It's a framework for understanding change at an individual level. Okay, so we've got to first address people, individuals in the organization. ADKAR obviously has 5 elements or building blocks that have to be in place for real change to happen. So ADKAR stands for A, awareness. This represents a person's awareness of the nature of the change, why it's being made, and the risk of not changing. That is key. Sometimes to get people to the next level is we make them aware of the need to change, why we're trying to implement this change, but also add there is a risk of resisting change, a real risk to you, an individual, an employee, to your department, to the company, in the marketplace. There's a risk of not changing if we resist it. So A, awareness. D, desire. This represents the willingness to support and engage in the change process. K, knowledge. It represents the information, training, and education that is needed to know how to change. The second A, ability. It represents the realization or the execution of the actual change. It addresses turning that knowledge into action. And then R, reinforcement, it represents those internal and external factors that sustain the change moving forward. Now, the elements of the ADKAR model, they fall into a natural order. They have to be done in order, okay, the way they're listed, of how one person experiences change. So let me break that down for you. Desire cannot come before awareness, because it is the awareness of the need for change that stimulates our desire or triggers our resistance to that change. We need to make people aware of why the change is needed and the risk of resisting the change. Okay, we need to increase that awareness. They need to be aware of it in order for us to move them to the next natural state, which is we now can foster or trigger the desire for the change. Knowledge cannot come before desire, because we don't seek to know how to do something we do not want to do or have no desire to do. So we have to then work on the D, desire to change. We have to foster that and trigger that before we can go to knowledge, making them knowledgeable about the change. Ability cannot come before knowledge, because we cannot implement, we aren't going to be able to implement that which we do not know how to do. We don't have the ability to do something until we are knowledgeable about how to do it. And of course, reinforcement, it can't come before ability, because we can only recognize and appreciate what has already been achieved through our abilities. We cannot reinforce that which has not been done yet. So the life cycle for ADKAR, it begins after a change has been identified. So you do your gap assessment, your culture surveys, you look at your trends, your statistics, whatever realization, whatever prompted the realization for the change, ADKAR begins after the change has been identified. From that starting point, the ADKAR model provides a framework and a sequence for managing the people side of change. In the workplace, ADKAR provides a solid foundation for change management activities, including readiness assessments, sponsorship for change, having sponsors or champions, I guess you could say, communications, coaching, even training, recognition, and provides resistance management. So all these tools are kind of baked into this process, this approach, this ADKAR approach. I mean, look, I said it before, there are other models. This is but one that I have used and have seen success with in the past. I'm telling you, if you have a framework to manage change in a very methodical way, you'll be able to see, following ADKAR or something like this, it becomes very clear what you need to do. You'll recognize easily that you've probably been putting the cart before the horse, if you will. I just wanted to point you in the right direction to get started addressing what I stated earlier. That is, identifying the change that is needed is one thing, or having your eye on the finish line is okay. That should motivate us to figure out what we're going to need to do to get there, and that's where the work begins. Identify that change is needed. What change is that? Having the process to facilitate the change and ensuring its success, lasting success, is another thing. This tool can help. Stop managing from where you wish you were, identify where you are right now, and get started laying out a plan to achieve successful, lasting change today. Yet another tool that we safety professionals need to be able to use. And this tool can be used for any type of change in the workplace, and not just safety. HR folks use change management, lean, quality. It can be used in any of those areas. So it's another example. And if you've listened to any of my podcasts regularly, going back, you know that I am huge. I am big on this. We need to stop living in a bubble. Safety people aren't special. We are a part of the organization supporting the business. We need to integrate and work with, collaborate with other areas of the business. Okay. We need to speak their language, the operators, the workers, the engineers, supervisors, the business leaders. We need to learn and understand what it is they have to do on a daily basis so that we can integrate our processes, our systems to support that work. This is another example. We need business tools to help us do what we need to do in the safety world. We need business tools. So when you go to my resources page, you're going to see a lot of books on, politics, silos, turf wars, how to break down barriers and silos in business to collaborate better, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Why are we talking about management teams? Well, you probably manage or have to chair or start up a safety committee or safety team, or you're a member of a team, so you need to benefit from this information. Death by meeting, I did an episode on that one of my favorite books. You've got to have meetings and facilitate meetings. Quite frankly, you've got to hold meetings that don't suck. Part of the problem with safety is, we're not talking the language everyone else is using. We're weird. We're like the Klingons, right? We're speaking a whole nother language, and we need to stop doing that. So these common business tools, we need to be really, really, really good at using them. So all of these general business and management tools, we need to know how to use them effectively. We have to. If we're going to be successful at safety, in influencing and helping support the business, we need to understand these things. So I have a reading list on the resources page. There are some safety-centric books that are really, really good. Lean Safety, I'm going to do an episode on that one because, another example, we need to understand some of the tools that are already out there that our businesses, many of our businesses are already using and are trained in how to use. We can use those for safety, so that's a good one. And this one, ADKAR, change is something that we need to help facilitate, so we need to understand it. Let me tell you, the name of the book is ADKAR, A Model for Change in Business, Government, and Our Community. If we're good at this, if we get this one, we're going to be rock stars. You're going to be value to the company, to the organization. You're going to be the office MVP everyone talks about, right? That's going to be you. That's not what it's about. But I'm telling you right now, you want to be successful in business and industry, no matter what you do, you've got to understand the business and you've got to understand people. You've got to understand those relational skills. It's not enough to be, to have the nerd alert go off because you can recite a reg. Trust me, I've fallen into this trap. I'm not exempt. I still get labeled with that today. To this day, I still get labeled with he's the technical expert, technical knowledge expert. That it's a hazard of the job. It comes with the territory. I get it. So it's not enough to be smart, to be intelligent, to be the one who knows all the regs. That's not enough. Knowing the standards is about maybe 15%, 20% of the job. It's 80% this other stuff. So I hope that you got a lot out of this episode. I get a lot out of talking about it. It helps bring me back to and ground me back into, the foundation I know I need to have. So it's very therapeutic for me. I love doing the podcast for that reason. I love seeing the emails come in, the questions, and I've even called folks out there, folks in Texas, Maryland, California, all over the country that I've talked to personally after sending me emails and talking about workplace safety problems and issues. I love the relationships that I'm forming, professional relationships I'm forming with everybody who listens. So keep the emails coming. Let me know what you like and don't like. Let me know what topics you would love to hear about. I would love to hear back from you. The email link will also be in the show notes, or just go to thesafetypropodcast.com, thesafetypropodcast.com. You got to spell the whole thing out. Go to the resources page to see the reading list. Go to the podcast page to listen to past episodes and see the show notes, and the links will all be in there as well. And you can shoot me an email from there. So, hey, I enjoyed this one. It's a good one, ADKAR. It's a great process for change. Go check it out. Hit that link in the show notes to check out that book. Let me know what you think. And until the next Safety Pro podcast episode, as always, please be safe.